Hey Beer Geeks, welcome to the Craft Beer channel. Now today we're going to be talking about a lager that's brewed in Yorkshire for a macro brewery that is based out of Canada and the US, but is labelled as if it is the very soul of Madrid. This is Madri, and today we're going to be talking about marketing in brewing and why the lies, the damn lies printed on this label actually matter. So if you don't generally watch the Craft Beer channel or indeed videos about beer, you can rest assured that there's always a controversy going on in the beer world, and usually that comes with some tired headlines about trouble brewing, and that's exactly what we've had in the last couple of weeks in the macro Pilsner, macro lager world, which lives rent-free in my head for no apparent reason. Now, I don't drink huge amounts of macro lager unless I'm doing a blind taste test, but I am endlessly fascinated by the marketing of them, which at the end of the day, once they're cold enough, is the biggest difference between many of these brands. And Madri is no different. It's a perfectly decent, well, why don't I crack it? It's a perfectly decent macro lager that was released in the UK during or maybe just before the pandemic. But it really kicked on after the pandemic, and we'll get into why that's important in a little bit. Yeah, very lemony. Wheaty. Crisp, refreshing. Quite dry. Decent beer. This video is not going to be smack talking well, I might turn into that, but that is not the main purpose of this video. What I wanted to talk about is the category which I guess companies that analyze data, companies that sell data to other breweries, companies that run pub companies or supermarkets might refer to as world lager, which I got my introduction to as a student drinking in Wetherspoons, and usually a blackboard that would say world lager. And essentially it was just lagers that weren't marketed as if they were from the UK. Pretty much without exception, they were brewed in the UK, and we'll get into that as well. But it became essentially a way for people to feel like they were being a little bit fancier, to feel like they might be getting a flavour of being abroad while stuck in a rainy Exeter Wetherspoons. Now, world lagers, these beers that are marketed as if they aren't from the UK, are big business here. In fact, about 25% of all the lagers consumed in the UK are supposed world lagers, which leads us to why Molson Coors, who didn't really play in that space yet, would want to release something like Madri. So the idea that Molson Coors came up with just before lockdown is Madri. So it's very much a response to the huge success of Peroni and Birra Moretti, which actually has just become the biggest selling lager in the UK. They probably didn't want to do another Italian lager, so the focus groups that would have come up with most of this thought, well, what other country do British people love to go on holiday to? Whose food, cuisine do they massively respect as a nation? Who do we, get on with and get excited by? We love their football. We love their ideas of siestas. We love the food that they cook. We love the beach lifestyle, all of this kind of stuff that makes Spain really appealing to British people. And they thought, well, there is already a famous Barcelona beer. It's not actually this one. Don't confuse Estrella Damm with Estrella Galicia. So we should go for the other famous, beautiful city in Spain. So they went for Madrid. Now we're going to dig into why all of that is complete nonsense in a second. But first we need to get into the controversy, which is actually the head of marketing of Estrella Galicia, which is an independent family-owned lager brewery doing exceptionally well for itself, brewing a 100% malt, I guess actually premium lager. The clue to a premium lager, just double check, yeah, is that they don't actually try to claim that it is, because the beer does the talking. So the head of marketing, Artur de Artaza, sorry if that's absolutely butchered, basically said that Molson Coors, the brewers of Madri, were being very dishonest, was I think the exact quote. And obviously that was picked up by lots of people, including Fortune, who got the wrong Estrella in the story. And yeah, they are being very dishonest. Let's not beat about the bush, and let's dig in to that dishonesty. So as I said in the intro, the first thing to point out is that this is not brewed in Spain, nor has it ever been brewed in Spain. In fact, on the back of this bottle, it says that it's distributed by the brewery that they collaborated with, La Sagra, which for a while was one of the bigger craft breweries in Spain, but is now owned, surprise, surprise, by Molson Coors. So the story is that this was a collaboration beer. That's the Spanish kind of element to it. Now, you don't have to have been in the craft beer industry for long to know that collaborations are often, you learn a lot, you launch some cool beers, you dare to brew some very exciting beers, but generally it's a couple of emails and a couple of beers on the day while somebody else does the work. I don't think it was even that, this particular collaboration. But that is, to be fair, to Molson Coors, a small link to Spain. Not really to Madrid, though, because La Sagra is in Toledo, about 70 miles outside of Madrid, which would be a little bit like a London brewery brewing a beer, calling it the Soul of London, but it turns out it's actually made by a brewery in a suburb of Swindon. So not owned by a Spanish brewery, not brewed in Spain, and also not owned or brewed by a company in Madrid itself. And yet we have the Soul of Madrid, the I think chalupo, sort of a traditional dapper bohemian kind of dress, male and female, that they've put on it. Obviously it's a man with a beard, because it's beer, it's got to be a man with a beard, no one else drinks it apparently. And then obviously use these classic Spanish ingredients, such as glucose syrup. Now, the timing of this release was pretty significant. It came out at a time when nobody could actually really go to Spain, when the UK had, for this incredible time, one of the few silver linings of the COVID era was that suddenly cafes, restaurants, bars were allowed to put tables outside when they didn't have licenses and stuff, so that people could still go out, enjoy themselves, and there was less risk of catching COVID. So we had this lovely burgeoning cafe culture. We had this real yearning to be in places like Spain and Italy and France, where the weather was actually good. And this beer could not have come at a better time, because it felt like it was a real taste of Madrid or of Spain. And it was, you know when you tell a lie, and I guess it kind of really gets out of hand. It felt a little bit like that, and it was cropping up everywhere. It was an incredibly huge launch, which obviously then upset people like Mahou are actually the biggest selling, I guess, the actual taste of Madrid. They are based in Madrid and always have been, although they now own horrible companies like Founders. And breweries like this, and presumably Estrella Damm as well, because these beers are actually Spanish, actual flavours of the places that they're from, not the flavour of Tadcaster, Yorkshire. Although I've just noticed he's got a flat cap on. I don't know if that's what chalupos wear or whether that's a nod to Yorkshire. And there's a rose. Maybe there's depth to this. No, what am I talking about? So we have to start to ask, does this matter? Is this dishonest to the consumer to say this is a Spanish lager, the soul of Madrid, the flavour of Madrid, but it's brewed in Tadcaster just off the motorway on the way to York? So the first thing to point out is that I have absolutely no issue with them calling it something like a Spanish lager. We do that all the time in the craft beer industry. American Pale Ale, Belgian style Wheat Ale, Bavarian style Weissbier, English Pale Ale. These things are not necessarily where they're from, they're where they're inspired by, which is fine again. But often, and in fact almost exclusively, they involve ingredients from that place, which I can assure you is not happening in Tadcaster in Yorkshire. And there's also no real definition of what a Spanish lager could be. If you look at the blind taste test I've done of macro beers, it seems that a lot of Spanish beers have a slight rhubarb and custard flavour. Drumstick lollies. Drumstick lollies? So there's something in the water, or the yeast, or the barley that's presenting a little bit strange, but I don't think anybody seized on that as the exceptional thing about Spanish lagers. But, an American Pale Ale will have American hops in, very likely. A Bavarian-style wheat beer will have a Bavarian yeast, very likely. A Belgian wheat beer, Wit beer, will probably have coriander and orange, which might not be from the lowlands, but it is traditional in that style and has been that way for centuries in some ways. So there is no sort of way of pointing that this is a Spanish lager, which is both more misleading and a slight excuse as to why they can get away with it. The other thing to say that even the more loose marketing that they've used, this sort of sense of place, this sense of Madrid itself, is also not unusual in beer. Peroni have traded off it forever, Beer Moretti trade off of it, and craft brewers trade off of it. We're always saying, these American hops will give you, or, it'd be like walking through a forest on the west coast of America, this kind of stuff, to try and instill this idea of sense of place into people. The issue that I have is that when that is done by people, particularly in the crop industry, but also in the wider industry as well, is that they are being aspirational in that. They are hoping that you're going to do this. They're not selling it saying you will be walking through the forest, or saying this was a collaboration with a brewery 70 miles from that forest. They are saying we love what happens on the west coast and we are trying to replicate it here because we love it, because you cannot get hold of it, or because it's not fresh by the time it gets here, so it's not quite the same. So it's about the liquid at the end of the day. They are saying this liquid will transport you. This liquid will have a real sense of place and get you excited for, yeah, summer in California or winter in Bavaria. The issue I have with this kind of marketing that Madri have done, Molson Coors have done, is that there is no aspiration to this. There is nothing in this bottle, that would remotely suggest Madrid at all. Really, if they wanted to do that, they should have taken inspiration from this, which has a very, very different recipe and a pretty different flavour. What they have done is they have brewed to the British palates a light, crisp, refreshing, ultimately pretty bland. Yeah, ultimately pretty bland lager, and then just shoved a guy who looks vaguely Spanish. Oh, he's even got a tattoo. Good lord, vaguely Spanish on the label, and said, "Yeah, this is from Madrid." You could say that this is from, I don't know, Paris. You could say that this is from Florence. You could say that this is from, I mean, a nation that actually has brewing heritage and should excite people, like Munich. You know, you could pick up this liquid, put a new label on it, and claim it is from anywhere, absolutely anywhere, which is not the case of many of the beers that I love and many of the breweries that do market themselves saying you're going to get a sense of place or be transported. You know, they are trying to recreate those flavors. This does absolutely none of that. If anything, it does the opposite. It tries to taste like a classic British lager, like all the other ones on the bar. So does this really matter? If you enjoy Madri, and I would absolutely not judge you for enjoying Madri, does it matter where the beer was brewed? Does it matter who owns the beer? Does it matter whether there is any sense of Madrid, whether La Sagra had anything to do with this beer? And the answer is a profound yes. Because beer has a bit of an honesty problem and always has, and I'm talking about craft or macro here. This is not really a lager. This is probably brewed in around about a week. It is heavily filtered and pasteurized. If you took this to Germany and said it was a lager, brewers would genuinely laugh in your face. This is not Spanish. It has nothing to do with Madrid. It has a little bit to do with Toledo, where La Sagra are, potentially, although that might just be marketing as well. And what that results in is damaging the breweries that do actually market themselves correctly. And I'm not saying that, you know, I don't necessarily buy this sort of, it's annoying that they're doing this, this upsets me, it's taking away market share, this kind of stuff. I'm not so worried about that. What I'm worried about is the fact that when a great brewery talks about something such as, you know, we brew this to the German purity law, or we use American hops, or maybe one day we use beautiful Spanish hops, they're going to struggle to get through the noise, because it's going to be full of people that have essentially cried wolf and gone, this is what Spanish lager is, this is what it tastes like. And when somebody comes along with a beer that is actually Spanish, people are going to be baffled by it, and they're going to go, well, that doesn't taste like the Spanish lagers I knew. That has nothing, no man in a flat cap with an anchor tattoo on it, so how can that be a Spanish lager? So what it sort of creates is this snowball effect of where the lies get caught up with the truths and we don't know which is which. And this is why I think a lot of consumers, when it comes to beer, are very, very confused, whether they're looking at craft beers or whether they're looking at macro beers. There's no real way to say what the difference between this and Birra Moretti would be, even though they claim to come from different countries, different cultures, different cuisines, different people, different multinational breweries that own them. And the other issue I have with this is that this is not playing a long game. Most of the brands that are released by these multinationals, these new, invented, made-up brands, or indeed brands that sort of contract brew but have been around for a long time, things like Foster's, which is originally Australian, things like Carling, which is originally Canadian. These brands, once they lose their kind of market value, their brand value, their sales, they will be stripped back, torn away, closed, and we've seen that for centuries as brands slowly die. They either morph into something else, like say Michelob Ultra went from Anheuser-Busch's sort of main premium brand, more premium than even Budweiser, and is now their light lager. And they're not playing the long game, and these brands are going to be gone, leaving other brands sort of left going, well, what have you done to my category? What have you done to the idea of Spanish lager just for 10, 15 years of huge sales before just finding the next country, maybe the Parisian lager will become a thing, and we'll have to do another video. Well, not me, I'll hopefully be retired by then, but somebody else will be doing a video going, what is Parisian lager, and does it matter that people are lying to us? Ad nauseam. I was going to do the conclusion, but I have just seen there's a QR code on the Madri bottle. I'm going to scan that, have a little look-see of what I might get. It's not working. Come on, I want to experience the soul of Madrid. You know, for a second there, I thought I wasn't going to learn what the soul of Madrid was. Right, what have we got here? Right, cookies, okay. I'm going to decline all those cookies, thank you very much, Madri exceptional. Oh, now my birthday. You're not getting that either. I'm going to pretend I was born in 2000, that'd be nice. Oh, right. So you get a map of where to buy some more not Spanish lager. I'm not really sure that's experiencing the soul of Madrid, drinking. For some reason it thinks I'm in Manchester, drinking Madri in Manchester. So what's my conclusion? I guess my conclusion is that dishonesty such as this, playing around with provenance, which is a hugely important thing, both to consumers and indeed to just supply chains, can be hugely damaging. It's already meant that this category of world lager, which could be quite a cool thing, you know, if it was actually brewed where it was, or at least inspired by where it was, or has history where it was, that would be very cool. You could go into any bar in the UK and you could have like a Munich Helles, you could have an American light lager, you could have a Yorkshire. I mean, it's just got the flat cap. They just need to change some colours and we'd have a beautiful Yorkshire lager. And we could learn what all these different places taste like, what they smell like, what food they go with. This does the exact opposite. And it damages the market of, say, somebody like Estrella Garcia, who make pretty good lager. Has a good whack of bitterness and somehow tastes like holiday. I must have drunk that in Spain at some point because that's doing some kind of nostalgia for me. It damages their chances and therefore damages the whole category as a whole, because Madri will probably not be around in a couple of decades' time. It will be a sub-brand that's probably in a country that you didn't know Molson Coors was selling beer in. But the breweries that do use provenance honestly and do care about what the consumer is buying and that they are getting the thing that they are inspecting are going to be really damaged by this. And I can see why Estrella Galicia, and indeed probably Estrella Damm, were really, really angry about this. And if I was Spanish, I'd be pretty annoyed at this. If I went over to Spain and found that there was a brewery in Spain brewing, well, I guess an American brewery in Spain brewing a bitter and saying it was the pride of London, actually Fuller's would really step in there, I'd be kind of furious that that was the case. And I think that you probably would be too about your home nations, because they do have flavour, they do have culture, they do have important things to say culturally and flavour-wise. And when somebody comes in and says, we know what it is and we're just bottling it in Tadcaster, it's pretty dismissive and it's basically appropriation to some extent. So yeah, I'm not saying don't drink Madri. It's pretty good. It's a pretty good macro lager. I don't think it was in my blind taste test, but it probably would have done okay. But I do think that we should be demanding honesty from our consumers, from our breweries, whether they're small or whether they're large, whether they're independent or they're macro. They even go to the lie of putting actual Spanish on the back, even though Fabricado el Reino Unido por Molson Coors Brewing Company. You know, they are leaning into this lie, and I don't think that's acceptable at all, because provenance matters. You cannot fake provenance. You should not fake provenance for like food safety, food hygiene, this kind of stuff, but also for consumer marketing and for the good of the industry that you're in. So if you enjoy Madri, drink it, but I'll be picking up some independent, family-owned Spanish lager next time I want to feel like I'm on a beach or a very big city in the centre of Spain. Salud.